Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. In this lesson, we are going to study not increasing and decreasing intervals anymore, but positive and negative intervals. Okay, so notice the question here says determine the domain on which the following graph of f is positive. So positive is not the same as increasing. So this is still not that hard, but we are doing this 100% for the sake of making sure we know the difference between positive and increasing, because these are very commonly confused, and we will run into both constantly during our year together in calculus. So let me give you some definitions, two we've seen before, and then two that are specific to this lesson. So increasing and decreasing have to do with the slope of the function. We saw that in the previous lesson and in pre-calculus, right? So these are both definitions having to do with the slope. Increasing means a positive slope, decreasing means a negative slope. Positive and negative just have to do with the y values, okay? So whether the y values are positive or negative determines whether we say the function is positive or negative. So for example, from 3 to infinity is a positive and the reason for that is that this part of the graph from 3 to infinity is above the x-axis. Same is true for negative infinity to negative 1, because that part of the graph from negative infinity to negative 1 is above the x-axis. And then similarly, our negative interval, for this particular graph, there's only one, and it's between those two numbers from negative 1 to 3. And again, we're going to use parentheses because we're not going to include the endpoints, because at negative 1 and at 3, the value of the graph is 0, so it's neither positive nor negative. Okay? And notice our increasing and decreasing intervals do not align with these, so these are completely separate. A graph can be increasing and negative, as it is here, right? Increasing and negative, but also increasing and positive, as it is up here. Okay. So I would say make sure you have these definitions written down, and note that one has to do with slope and one has to do with the y values. So here's a question that tests exactly that, what I was just talking about. So the question is, from point B to point C, what's true about the graph? So let's figure out what we're talking about. That's here. We have to decide, notice our options are increasing, decreasing, and positive, negative, right? So I'm going to start with positive or negative, and notice we're above the x-axis here. So we want positive, and then we have to decide increasing or decreasing, and my slope is negative. I'm going downhill, so we want to say the graph is positive and decreasing. Here's one more example. So determine all intervals on which f of x is greater than or equal to 0. F of x really just means the y value, so this is y greater than or equal to 0. So greater than 0 means positive. And here's where they can get a little tricky, right? So positive, I'm going to highlight the parts of the graph that are positive to about 2, right? And notice at 2, y is 0. Y equals 0 is allowed, right? So this time, my interval, my positive interval, is going to be everything that's at 0 or above 0. So that would be from negative infinity to 2, and this time 2 gets a bracket. Remember, the bracket means that 2 is included. And then, notice now, I didn't quite capture them all. So we have this negative region, y is less than 0 here, and then I continue to go positive to the right of 8. So I'd say from 8 to infinity is that right-hand interval. Infinity gets a parentheses, and 8 gets a bracket, because again, 8 is included